There are actors who play characters. And then there are actors who seem to disappear into them. Al Pacino belongs to that second, rarer kind. When he looks at the camera, it does not feel like a performance trying to impress you. It feels like a private storm accidentally caught on film. The voice, the eyes, the pauses, the sudden explosions of emotion. Everything seems to come from somewhere deeper than technique. But that is also the mystery of Al Pacino. How much of a man can disappear into his art before the world forgets the man was ever there? For more than 50 years, audiences have known his face. Michael Corleone, Frank Serpico, Sonny Wartzik, Tony Montana, Carlito Brigante, Vincent Hanna, the blind, wounded soldier in Scent of a Woman, the old master on stage, still chasing Shakespeare, still returning to the theater as if cinema was never enough. But behind all those faces was a boy from New York who grew up with absence, loneliness, and a need to perform before he ever understood what acting meant. Pacino did not become great because life was easy. He became great because something inside him was always searching for a place to go. The stage gave him that place. The camera trapped it forever. And fame turned it into a legend. Alfredo James Pacino was born on April 25, 1940, in New York City. His parents separated when he was still very young, and he was raised largely by his mother and grandparents in the Bronx. That childhood matters because Pacino's acting has always carried the feeling of someone who understands what it means to be alone in a crowded room. He was not born into comfort. He was not raised as a polished Hollywood prince. He grew up in a working-class Italian-American world where family, survival, pride, and silence shaped the emotional language of daily life. His mother took him to movies when he was a child, and something about the screen entered him early. He began imitating the people he saw there, turning movie characters into small performances for the people around him. That is one of the quiet secrets of Pacino's life. Before acting was a career, it was a way to survive attention. It was a way to turn shyness into control. It was a way for a sensitive child to step outside himself and become someone else for a moment. But adolescence did not make him easier to understand. Pacino was restless. He drifted. He struggled with school. He took odd jobs. He lived through loss at an age when many people are still trying to become adults. In his early 20s, the deaths of his mother and grandfather hit him hard, and those losses became part of the emotional darkness that would later appear in his work. The theater became his rescue. Not fame. Not money. Not Hollywood. Theater. That is important because many people think of Pacino as a movie star first. But Pacino's soul belongs to the stage. The stage gave him discipline, danger, and a direct relationship with truth. On stage, there is nowhere to hide. If the emotion is false, the room knows. If the silence is empty, the audience feels it. If the actor is not alive in the moment, the performance dies in front of everyone. Pacino needed that pressure. He studied acting seriously and eventually entered the world of the actor's studio, where Lee Strasberg became one of the most important influences on his life. Strasberg was central to method acting in America, and the actor's studio helped shape generations of major performers. Pacino later described the actor's studio as a major turning point for him. Method acting is often misunderstood. People reduce it to extreme behavior or actors refusing to leave character. But at its core, it asks something much more dangerous. Can an actor use memory, pain, fear, desire, and private emotional truth to make a character feel alive? Pacino understood that danger. He was not just pretending. He was digging. And sometimes, when an actor digs that deeply, the role does not simply belong to the actor. The actor begins to belong to the role. Before Hollywood fully understood him, the theater did. Pacino built his name through stage work, winning serious recognition before becoming a major screen icon. He won a Tony Award for Does a Tiger Wear a Necktie? And that stage success helped open the door to film. Then came The Panic in Needle Park. In that film, Pacino did not look like a traditional leading man. He was not smooth in the Hollywood sense. He was nervous, alive, streetwise, unpredictable, and wounded. He played Bobby, a young man caught in addiction and decay, and his performance had the rawness of someone who understood the street not as decoration, but as atmosphere. The film did not turn him into a superstar overnight, but it did something more important. It made Francis Ford Coppola notice him, and Coppola saw what others did not. He saw that the small, intense actor from New York might contain the hidden stillness needed for Michael Corleone. At first, that idea made little sense to many people. Michael Corleone was supposed to be the center of The Godfather's transformation. He had to begin as the outsider son, the war hero who wants no part of the family business. Then, slowly, almost invisibly, he had to become the coldest and most powerful man in the room. Paramount was not convinced Pacino was the answer. He was not a conventional movie star. He did not dominate the screen in an obvious way. His power was internal, and internal power can be difficult to recognize before the camera reveals it. But Coppola fought for him, and the history of American cinema changed. In the opening wedding scene of The Godfather, Michael Corleone sits apart from the family machine. He wears a military uniform, and that uniform matters. It tells us he belongs to America, not only to Sicily. It tells us he has tried to build an identity outside the Corleone world. He explains his family decay almost as if he is explaining a foreign country. He knows what they are, but he does not yet want to be one of them. Pacino's genius in those early scenes is restraint. He does not announce Michael's conflict. He lets it sit behind the eyes. He looks distracted, distant, almost detached from the wedding around him. Other characters are louder, warmer, more theatrical. Michael is quiet. The danger is that quietness can be mistaken for emptiness. But Pacino understood that Michael's silence was not empty. It was resistance. He was watching the family, judging it, rejecting it, and, without knowing it yet, preparing to inherit it. The first transformation comes after the attack on his father. When Michael visits the hospital and realizes his father is unprotected, something inside him changes. He does not panic. He acts. He thinks. He protects. And in that moment, the son who wanted to escape the family begins to become the man who will save it. Then comes the scene where Michael proposes killing Sollozzo and the police captain. The others laugh. They still see him as the college boy, the outsider, the son who does not belong to the business. But Pacino's eyes tell a different story. Michael is not joking. He is not performing toughness. He has made a decision. That is what makes the scene chilling. The birth of Michael Corleone does not arrive with shouting. It arrives with calm. The calm of a man who has crossed an invisible line and will never fully return. This is why Pacino's performance in The Godfather remains so powerful. He does not play Michael as a monster from the beginning. He plays him as a man who can still choose another life, until one choice after another closes the doors. By the end, when Kay asks whether he killed Carlo, Michael looks at her with a face that has become almost unreadable. The warmth is gone. The young war hero is gone. The son who said, "That's my family, Kay, it's not me," has disappeared. And in his place stands the Godfather. That is the haunting part. Pacino did not simply show a man becoming powerful. He showed a soul disappearing behind power. And maybe that is why Michael Corleone followed him for the rest of his life. Some roles make an actor famous. Michael Corleone became a shadow. After The Godfather, Pacino could have leaned into glamour. Instead, he kept choosing difficult men, men under pressure, men trapped inside systems, men whose moral lives were collapsing in public. In Serpico, he played Frank Serpico, the real New York police officer who exposed corruption inside the NYPD. The role earned Pacino an Academy Award nomination and showed another side of his intensity. Serpico is almost the opposite of Michael Corleone. Michael becomes corrupt in the name of family power. Serpico resists corruption even when it costs him everything. But both men are isolated. That is the Pacino connection. He understood isolation. Frank Serpico begins with idealism. He wants to be a good cop. He believes in doing the job honestly. But the longer he stays inside the system, the more he realizes the system does not want honesty. It wants silence. It wants obedience. It wants everyone to accept the dirt as normal. Pacino's performance slowly changes. The eyes that once held energy begin to carry exhaustion. The body becomes heavier. The beard grows. The man becomes almost feral in his loneliness. He is surrounded by other officers, yet he is completely alone. That is one of Pacino's great themes. A man can be in the middle of a crowd and still be abandoned. Then came Dog Day Afternoon. If Michael Corleone is control and Serpico is moral isolation, Sonny Wartzik is pure exposed nerve. In Dog Day Afternoon, Pacino plays a desperate bank robber whose failed robbery becomes a public spectacle. The film was based on real events, and Sidney Lumet directed it with a sense of pressure that makes the whole story feel like it is unfolding in real time. Pacino's Sonny is loud, sweating, anxious, funny, frightened, and strangely human. He is not a criminal mastermind. He is a man overwhelmed by the consequences of his own decision. And once again, Pacino finds the human being inside the headline. That may be his greatest gift. He does not play ideas. He plays wounds. By the mid-1970s, Pacino had become one of the defining actors of his generation. The Godfather, Serpico, The Godfather Part 2, Dog Day Afternoon, and later, And Justice for All, gave him a run of performances that few actors in film history could match. During the 1970s alone, he earned multiple Oscar nominations, becoming a symbol of the new American acting style: raw, internal, psychologically intense, and morally complicated. But success did not make Pacino simple. If anything, it made him more difficult. He was not a celebrity who seemed hungry to be everywhere. He often appeared private, guarded, and wary of fame. That privacy became part of his legend. The public knew the characters better than it knew him. And that raises the central mystery of Pacino's life. Was he hiding from fame? Or was he hiding inside the work? The Godfather Part 2 took Michael Corleone even deeper into darkness. The first film showed the transformation. The second showed the cost. Michael has power now. But power has not made him free. It has made him colder, more suspicious, and more alone. The genius of The Godfather Part 2 is that it contrasts Michael's world with the rise of his father, Vito Corleone. Vito's story carries family, community, memory, and old-world survival. Michael's story carries business, betrayal, loneliness, and the machinery of modern power. One man builds a family. The other preserves an empire by losing his family. Pacino's task in The Godfather Part 2 was incredibly difficult. He had to play a man who barely moves emotionally on the surface, while inside, everything is tightening. A glance must carry rage. A pause must carry betrayal. A lowered voice must carry threat. He does it with the eyes. When Michael discovers Fredo's betrayal, Pacino does not need to explode. The pain is worse because it is contained. The brother he once protected has become a wound he cannot forgive. And when he later cuts Fredo out of his life, the scene is not only cruel, it is tragic because Michael is destroying one of the last human bonds left to him. Then comes Kay. Kay represents the life Michael once might have had. She represents the outside world, the American future, the possibility of not becoming his father's successor. When their marriage breaks apart, it is not only a domestic collapse, it is the final death of the young Michael. Pacino plays that death with frightening precision. The man who began as an outsider to crime has become a prisoner of power. And that is the terrible irony of Michael Corleone. He wins everything and becomes empty. For many actors, a role like Michael would be enough for an entire career. But Pacino kept searching. Sometimes that search led to triumph. Sometimes it led to confusion. Sometimes it led him away from mainstream success and back toward the stage. That may frustrate viewers who only want the greatest hits. But it reveals something essential about him. Pacino was never only chasing popularity. He was chasing acting itself. He returned again and again to the theater. He explored Shakespeare. He directed Looking for Richard, a documentary about Richard III, not because it was the obvious commercial move, but because Shakespeare mattered to him. He wanted to understand language, power, performance, and why old texts still breathe in modern actors. Frankly notes Pacino's passion for language and acting in connection with Looking for Richard and his stage work. This is why calling Pacino a movie star is not enough. He is an actor's actor. A man obsessed with the craft. A man who can be extravagant, quiet, explosive, strange, brilliant, uneven, and hypnotic, sometimes in the same performance. In Scarface, he went in the opposite direction from Michael Corleone. Michael is silence becoming power. Tony Montana is appetite becoming destruction. Everything about Tony is bigger. The voice, the body, the hunger, the rage, the ambition. It is not subtle in the usual sense, but it is unforgettable because Pacino understands the madness of wanting too much. Tony Montana does not simply want money. He wants proof that he exists. He wants the world to look at him. He wants respect so badly that he destroys any life that might have given respect meaning. That is another Pacino theme. The desperate need to be seen. The terrible price of being seen too much. Then came Scent of a Woman, the film that finally won Pacino the Academy Award for Best Actor. He played Lieutenant Colonel Frank Slade, a blind, angry, wounded man whose theatrical confidence hides despair. Pacino won the Oscar for that role after years of nominations. The performance is big, famous, and often quoted. But beneath the force is sadness. Frank Slade is not only loud, he is lonely. He is a man using performance to keep collapse away. And that, again, feels close to Pacino's deeper artistic world. People remember the roar. But the wound is what gives the roar meaning. In Heat, Pacino faced Robert De Niro across a diner table in one of the most famous scenes in modern crime cinema. For decades, fans had connected them through The Godfather Part 2, even though they did not share scenes in that film. In Heat, they finally sat across from each other as two men on opposite sides of the law who understand each other more than anyone else can. That scene works because it is not really about cops and robbers. It is about recognition. Two professionals. Two obsessive men. Two lonely lives. Two people who sacrificed ordinary happiness for the thing they do better than anyone else. That may be why Pacino and De Niro became linked in the public imagination. They represent two different forms of intensity. De Niro often seems to disappear downward into physical detail and stillness. Pacino seems to burn upward into voice, rhythm, and emotional electricity. Both changed acting. But Pacino's mystery is different. His performances often feel like a man fighting with the role while giving himself to it. In his later years, Pacino became more reflective. His memoir, Sonny Boy, was published in 2024, offering a personal look at his childhood, career, failures, financial struggles, relationships with fame, and lifelong devotion to acting. The publisher describes the book as a memoir that gives full attention to his great roles and collaborations while also exploring creativity, commerce, love, and purpose. That memoir matters because Pacino spent much of his life as a private figure. For decades, people studied the face on screen, but the man behind it remained elusive. Sonny Boy suggested something moving. In old age, Pacino was finally willing to look back, not only at the triumphs, but at the chaos, mistakes, losses, and strange accidents that shaped him. This is why his final chapter feels different from a normal Hollywood ending. It is not about a man trying to prove he is still young. It is about an old actor looking back at the roles that consumed him and asking what remains. What remains after Michael Corleone? What remains after Tony Montana? What remains after the applause? What remains when the public knows your voice, your eyes, your famous lines, but still does not truly know you? Pacino is still alive, but his final chapter already has the feeling of a long curtain call. Not because the work is over in a simple way, but because the meaning of the work has changed. When he was young, acting was escape. Then it became survival. Then it became fame. Then it became burden. And finally, it became memory. That is the hidden story of Al Pacino. He did not just become famous by playing powerful men. He became famous by showing the damage inside power. Michael Corleone gains a kingdom and loses his soul. Frank Serpico keeps his soul and loses his place in the system. Sonny Wertzig becomes a spectacle because desperation has nowhere private to go. Tony Montana gains the world and is destroyed by his own hunger. Frank Slade roars because silence might reveal how broken he is. Again and again, Pacino played men who were trapped. Trapped by family. Trapped by justice. Trapped by money. Trapped by desire. Trapped by pride. Trapped by their own performance of masculinity. And maybe that is why he became so magnetic. Because the audience could feel the trap. They did not only watch him act, they watched him struggle against invisible walls. The eyes always seemed to know more than the words. The pause always seemed to hide a second story. The explosion always felt like something that had been locked away too long. That is what made him dangerous on screen. Not loudness, pressure. Pacino's greatness is pressure. A pressure that begins in silence and then breaks open. That is why his best performances do not age like ordinary performances. They still feel alive because they are built from contradiction. He can be tender and terrifying, small and enormous, controlled and chaotic, vulnerable and dangerous. He can make a whisper feel like a threat and a shout feel like a confession. But the cost of that kind of acting is mystery. Where does the character end? Where does the actor begin? For Al Pacino, that question has followed him from the Bronx to Broadway, from The Godfather to Shakespeare, from young fame to old reflection. Maybe he never wanted to answer it completely. Maybe the mystery is part of the art. In the end, Al Pacino's life is not simply the story of a great actor. It is the story of a man who found a way to turn loneliness into performance, pain into rhythm, and silence into danger. He came from a childhood marked by absence. He entered the theater looking for truth. He walked into cinema and changed the way actors could appear on screen. He made Michael Corleone quiet enough to be terrifying. He made Serpico lonely enough to be heroic. He made Sonny desperate enough to be human. He made Tony Montana monstrous enough to be tragic. And through it all, he remained strangely unreachable. The public saw everything. And still, somehow, Al Pacino kept something hidden. That may be his final secret. The actor who gave so much of himself to the screen never fully surrendered the private man behind the performance. He let us see the fire. He let us hear the roar. He let us watch the transformation. But he never completely explained the source. And perhaps that is why we are still watching. Because Al Pacino is not only remembered for the characters he played, he is remembered for the feeling that something real was burning inside them. Something wounded. Something restless. Something impossible to fake. The life and last days of Al Pacino are not about disappearance in the ordinary sense. They are about an artist reaching the final chapter of a legendary career, still surrounded by the ghosts of the men he became. Michael, Serpico, Sonny, Tony, Frank, Richard. Each one took something from him. Each one left something behind. And somewhere behind them all stands Alfredo James Pacino, the boy from New York who learned that becoming someone else could be the only way to reveal the truth. That is the strange beauty of his life. He disappeared into roles and became unforgettable.